My work got did that after.
Really pretty picture. Yeah. Nobody blinking, making faces.
Something. I tucked it in my budget book. I tell Wendy, if I kept everything for the past 9 years, I'd have to add a room. And chronological, it's great.
That's my problem. I never get to set it up.
Yeah. Oh, I have great intentions. Great intentions. Yeah. Oh. I call it UBIS. Useless bits of information. Okay. I'm told I got to bang this. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. We'll start out with visitors, approval of minutes, then we'll do the CIP. The Ahern Middle School revised school improvement plan, other matters, and there will be an executive session tonight for, I believe, non-union negotiation? Okay. Okay, visitors, anybody? Nope. Okay, approval of minutes. Katie Dare is not with us tonight. She's with her daughter down in Florida at the cheerleading meet.
We have an update as to how the cheerleading team is done.
She called me this morning.
Oh,
You want to do it another matter, so would you like to hear about
Do
it
it right
now?
now. I'd like to hear
Well,
about it now.
let me pull out my notes to make sure I get
Okay.
it correct. She called me this morning. Our cheerleaders went from preliminaries, they went to semifinals, and then they went to finals.
Wow.
And our Foxborough cheerleaders are 12th in the nation.
Wonderful.
Varsity medium.
That's terrific. That's impressive.
In Miss Adair's words, they had an outstanding performance. They were full of energy, and they have a huge trophy for the trophy case when they return.
Isn't that wonderful? Thank you. When I was walking in tonight, I was like, oh, good. I wonder how they did. So, perfect.
Try carrying that trophy on the plane. It's not easy.
All right, approval of minutes.
I think there's 3 sets, Martha.
Yes, we'll do the first one from October 24th.
I would move to approve.
I would like to have a note made on that one.
Okay.
The back of the October 24th minutes, that last paragraph, I actually was the one that had asked Chief O'Leary to join the discussion, and I would like that so noted. I would, that Ms. Committee asked Chief O'Leary to join the discussion and to quickly highlight what he and Kevin Murphy presented on the alcohol and on drug and alcohols given to the school committee on 9/18.
Which one do you want? I'm on
October
October.
25th,
Page 2?
on the back. Okay. It's not mentioned.
Oh, I'm
so
going to say it's nothing there.
No, it's
Okay.
not there.
So you
I would
want
like
this
it mentioned that I would like it added right before it says Chief O'Leary said.
Okay, so how would you like that to read?
I would like it added that Ms. Kaminsky asked Chief O'Leary to join the discussion and to quickly highlight his and Kevin Murphy's presentation on alcohol and drugs given to the school committee on 9/18/06.
Okay, can you just write that up and give it?
I have that, but I'd like to read it first, if I may, Martha,
Okay.
because somebody may,
All right. I see you're
and-
frantically trying to do that.
Yeah, no, I have it, Wendy, I have it
Okay.
right here, because I
Okay.
can't do it any other way. The second to the last sentence where it says, I'm sorry. So this paragraph would read as it is, and then the last sentence would read, Mrs. Kaminsky asked the Board of Selectmen if they would like to join us in a community-wide forum on alcohol and drugs in early spring. And I would like it noted that the selectmen responded, the selectmen the selectmen board members indicated their willingness to join the school committee in this effort, because that's what they said that night, if that's acceptable to the rest of my colleagues.
Not a problem with me.
No problem.
And I have that.
Okay. Any other additions? No? Okay. Motion to accept as amended?
As amended?
As amended. Second?
I'll motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
4 in favor, 1 absent. January 22nd.
I would move to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
4 in favor. January 29th.
One question I have. Under the second paragraph, Mr. Randy Scollins and Mr. Andrew Galla. Second line there, it says to talk about how the revenue procedure comes together. Larry and Randy had used the words revenue projection and revenue picture.
Right.
I'm not wedded to any word, but perhaps we want to use the word projection versus procedure, just so that anyone reading this would be able to follow. But I'm not wedded to it.
I'm fine with that change.
Okay.
Which would
Are you
prefer,
going-
Larry?
Projection.
Yes, I agree.
I can live with it either way.
Yeah, I felt the same way, but it took me a while when I kept reading procedure, I kept thinking, so I referred back to my notes. So it might be easier for people to follow.
Any other corrections? Motion as amended.
Motion made.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Jack.
Michael Lear can join us at the table. He's got a considerable piece of the discussion of the FYOE capital improvement plan. There was some information that was distributed at the last school committee meeting, a cover memo, and I tried to provide a brief description of the new process that the Mass School Building Authority will be pursuing to set the stage for the proposal we received from the McGuire Group. If you notice as you go farther into the package, there was nothing in the package in terms of renovations to any of the pieces of the high school that has previously appeared. We have a window until July 1st to submit a proposal to the Mass School Building Authority. Upon receipt of this initial proposal, they'll take a look at it, and they may or may not come out and then determine whether or not they'll invite us to round 2 sometime after July 1st. Given the condition of the buildings and the things that we saw that needed attention, one of the things that Mike and I had discussed was the fact that we really weren't sure in what order these items should be attacked from a standpoint of, we very well might say that we need to come in and do, let's say, the bathrooms first, which is probably a bad example. And then we'd find out that there's another piece of the renovation that would need to be done first. Mike contacted the McGuire Group and asked them to come out, and they've submitted a preliminary proposal, and I'd like to ask Mike to talk about the proposal and what we feel the benefits are.
All right, what we did, I mean, obviously it would help to get professional architects to come out. Not only do they want to identify what has to be done, looking at our building to bring it, up to current codes, et cetera. Also, how do we phase it in? We've got close to 900 students. What do we do with them as we're tearing this building apart and renovating? So we want them, A, to identify the areas that need upgrading and so on, give us a cost estimate, and then how are we going to phase it in? That's, I think, a very important piece, how we're going to do this. So they have given us a proposal, $9,975. They will come in, assess the building, areas that we want them to look at, heating, bathrooms, labs,
Windows.
ADA accessibility and so on. And then give us a plan and a budget to work off of. So that's one thing we would like an approval on, to give McGuire Group the go-ahead on that. Any questions on the McGuire Group or what our intentions are?
No, we've worked out with them before, and I think they're very credible.
McGuire Group is the one that designed the Ahern Middle School. Maybe I'm prejudiced, but I think they did a fabulous job. It's a beautiful building. I think they did a great job on it, and it'd be nice to work with them here. At least they know what we want and how to phase it in, and they know our wants and our needs, so.
Well, I think the other thing that they bring to the table for us is, and you and I, Paul, have talked about this, if somebody walked into town tomorrow and said, I'd like to donate $20 million to renovate the high school, so you ought to do what you want with. We have a school that's full of children. It's not like when we built the middle school, when we were able to move the 8th grade up here and work around. And so it's a complicated puzzle to put together how we would go about doing that. For instance, in the summer, there's only so much you can do in the summer months, et cetera. So I think that if we're going to put a plan forward to the state first, asking for assistance, we need to be able to think through how would we go about doing it. Would we do it over 3 years, 4 years, 2 years? How would we do it in a way? Because ultimately, the state, as you've seen in the material, those communities that have let their school buildings run down have a higher priority, which is kind of odd than those that have kept a good maintenance record. The problem we have is not that the maintenance of the buildings is in tough shape. It's the, I'll call it the infrastructure. It's the windows. It's the heating. It's the major items. It's the roof that's going to have to be repaired. So these are things that we're hoping that the state will recognize that in a building that's almost 40 years old, you have to replace the heating, you have to replace the windows. So we're hoping that with this group, they can help us prepare a package that will be well done so that the state will hopefully invite us back to round 2. And I don't think that Paul or I or Mike thought that we could do that totally by ourselves without having their expertise and their insight into helping put that package together. So I think it's a well worth investment of $10,000.
Now, would that come out of this year's budget? How will the 9975 be funded? Do we know that?
As we're doing the monthly budget projections, I would advocate at the point when we would process the payment that if we could afford it out of our operating budget, we would pay for it out of the operating. If we couldn't, I'd recommend funding it through the building rental account.
And I think you saw the report at our last meeting that Paul was looking at $125,000 surplus, of which Dr. Norton has earmarked a good portion of that for the new math program that we've all talked about. But that as we go through the rest of the year, we hope to have enough in the regular operating budget to cover that. But we do have contingencies if we need to. It's just one of these things that I really think we have to do.
Well, I think it puts some teeth into what we're doing too, and they know how, they can help us go after this money and prioritize and point out that we desperately need this. I mean, the science labs alone.
And one of the things that we'll do, Martha, is as we put this together, and after we've reviewed it with the committee, Paul has agreed to meet with both the state senator and the state representative, and that he and Jan would then walk them through with Mike at their side what we're going to do and why we're going to propose it, so that they can clearly understand what the needs are in Foxborough. We can invite them here, we can show them the schools, we can show them what we're doing, and hopefully get their support very early on in the process.
You know, it's kind of ironic because when we finally were able to redo the Ahern School, you know, part of how you got your money and what you were able to do was the fact that you had to put X amount of dollars back into your other buildings to maintain them and not let them ever get to that point. So, you know, hopefully that will hold us in good esteem with these people, that we are trying to keep things up, but it's the inside that's solid.
So I would move to approve the request for the $9,975, is it?
And I'd second that.
Okay.
It's a good spend.
Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Okay.
All right, now we'll do my wish list.
Okay.
Yes. These are items that...
Mike, can I just frame it up a little bit? The next section that Mike's going to go into, we provided a narrative of the, not all of the requests, but the majority of the requests in terms of providing some explanation. And when you get farther into the package, you'll notice that there's the standard, the same old spreadsheet that we had last year. It starts with 08 and runs out to 2012. On some of the items that appear year after year, we only explained it once, but tried to give a flavor of the items that we were looking for, and a little bit better explanation other than a title and a dollar amount. Thank you, Mike.
First one's the high school curbing. Obviously, anyone who drives up our driveway notices our curbing. It's precast over the years, salt, plowing, water, etc., has deteriorated to the nth degree. We have replaced part of the driveway from the back of the high school, right at the rear, all the way down to the bottom of the hill. We had that reclaimed, regraded, and a binder put down back in 2005, with the idea the very next year we'd replace the curbing with the granite from the center of town. It would be a shame to spend all that labor putting precast back in again. 25 years, so now we're back at the same boat. Put granite in, it's there for virtually forever. Obviously, the center of town wasn't finished in 2005. Or six. So the granite curbing is now available. So our proposal now is this summer, as soon as school gets out, we'll cut out, replace all the granite curbing from South Street all the way up to the tennis courts, both sides of the road. And we'll have to, I think there's a map that you were given, and the double lines will show you where the curbing is to be replaced. That's all new curbing, and then there'll be a brand new walk from South Street, again, all the way up to the tennis courts. And we have to add 6 new handicap ramps. We even have to put one now across South Street, because we were going to put a new walk and have a new handicap ramp on our property. We have to make across the street handicap accessible. So we propose to put one on South Street directly across from our driveway. So it will be new curbing, new sidewalks, and then putting a finish coat. We've encumbered the money. The money we appropriated to have regraded, we put, all that's out there now is a binder. And, the idea is once the curb was done, then we'd put the finish coat on. So we have $16,000 encumbered for the last few years that we've been carrying over, which will go towards this. So a new curbing, new handicap ramps, and then a finish coat on the driveway entrance. The rest of the curbing will be done at a later date in the front of the high school. And the reason we're postponing it to a later date is, A, we don't know how much granite we actually have till we fully lay it out. We get out, it's spread all over the town yard. We know approximate footage, but we want to make sure we have enough before we tear it out. And secondly, I think our proposal is going to come in that rather than use used granite curbing in the front of the high school, we propose putting new curbing. A, because the existing stuff, we need so many curves, and we may not have them, so you end up piecemealing it with short pieces. And it just, if it's the front of your building, we should do it right. There's a difference of about $10 a foot from resetting existing curbing to buying new. So we'll get a proposal to finish the rest of that. So it would be the front of the high school. The problem there, too, is we have to cut the walk. There's a concrete sidewalk. Where we're going to do now, it's a macadam or hot top walkway coming up, which we're going to tear up and replace. The front of the high school has poured concrete, so we have to cut it back to the first joint, tear that up, and then pull the curbing up, put new curbing, and then re-pour. So we have to replace half the sidewalk and all that curbing. So we propose to do that in the next go-around, we hope. The cost for the remainder of that is, we propose to do, I think it's about 575 feet around the front of the high school, which we'll have to use new curbing. Across the way, there's an additional 500 feet that we'll use, whatever's used left, whatever curbing we have left, we can use there and then replace with new. So the future, or the next go-around, would probably be in the $60,000 to $70,000 range to finish the curbing. But this year, we want to do the driveway all the way up to the tennis courts, both sides of the road. Any questions on that?
How much for the curbing will we do the second phase for the front of the high school? You
The high
said 60?
school, there's about 575 feet where there's concrete walk, and then across the way, there's an additional 500 feet that we can use curbing if we have it. But right in front of the high school, from this corner all the way down, is about 575.
And that's, you said 60,000, but how much was that?
No, all of it, it'd run about $60,000, we figure.
But
to
it makes
finish
sense
the
to wait on that also, because I mean, as we're laying that out, I'm sure the architects are going to tell us, we hit the threshold, we're going to need X number of handicap spots in
Exactly.
front. That middle section, which is deteriorated, it's not really aligned. I'm sure the architects are going to say we can't leave those trees because they add to the roof problem. So if you they reconfigure that space, it makes sense to hold off, because I'm
Exactly.
sure the architects will have not only a more efficient design, but one that's up to code,
Will
so
hopefully be included in
in the
the
renovation.
Exactly, we'll have them look at it. Also, we intend to widen the bottom of the driveway. Actually, we're going to cut the corner much better. The problem now is when the school buses get to the bottom of the hill, they have to cross almost into the other lane to make a right-hand turn. So we're going to cut the corner back a good 12, 14 feet, so as the buses can make the swing on our property without crossing lanes and so on. So we're going to widen that substantially at the bottom. You know, it was debated whether we had another lane. And we looked at that. The problem we found there was the buses are still going to have to hit the middle lane, so they have a wide turn, and we were afraid cars would pull up beside them and create a problem, you know what I'm saying? So by just cutting the corner back about 12 feet, the buses come down and make a nice swing with no problem, going into the other lane. So that's part of the deal.
A couple questions on
Yeah.
that. And I hear what you're saying, Mike. All the buses really take off at the same time, and I just want to make sure that we do widen it appropriately.
Oh, we
The high
had to
school and
look.
the Taylor are the two buildings that do not have access in and out. So there's, the Taylor gets around that by having a very wide in and out, kind of in a circular pattern. Here at the high school, every year, more and more things are scheduled here, town meetings are here, a whole range of things. So the demand on that driveway is not just considerable, it's going to continue to grow with all the sports and other events that we have, townwide events, Founder's Day, and I wouldn't want to be a few feet short and not have that second lane. I mean, St. Mark's said that they would give us a waiver. There was, I guess, an issue over the highway department at first said that they would put drainage in that we would need, and then there was a question of how that would be paid for. To save, 2 feet, that we may, hopefully, whatever we do with the renovation, we will not be redoing this driveway because it's badly needed now, and I would just hope that we would give that full consideration.
No, we
Chief
looked
O'Leary
at it. We talked to him. There was debate on how effective it would be, because you could only come up 2 or 3 car lengths because of the way the driveway is, so how
So
much would
Chief
you
O'Leary
gain?
said not a problem on that widening for that second lane?
No, not an issue at all, and it's all our property. So that's not an issue whatsoever. Like I say, it just makes the swing much easier, exiting to the right.
So for other events, when there aren't buses, you would then still have room for 2
Oh,
car
yes,
lanes?
for the
Okay,
cars and
so
everything.
it's
Oh,
just-
sure. I mean, we're doing it primarily for the school buses, but actually it's for anyone who exits the driveway. So we're just going to cut that corner. So in other words, you'd have a much wider area coming in. The left-hand side, we looked at that coming in, plenty of room, plenty of access, so we're not going to touch that. But the right-hand side, so you come down, the driveway will come down, and then it'll almost funnel out.
So you do have room for 2 lanes,
So-
actually 3. You'd still have the incoming, and if
Exactly.
cars are going out in a, after town
you could
meeting or
turn.
whatnot, you can still make a left and you still have a lane to make the right.
All right, and then the other part of that, which we kind of packaged together, if you look at the IGO school, right near the superintendent's area, near the
dangerous.
softball field,
Very dangerous.
the highway department many years ago put curbing in and built a wall and so on for people to sit and watch Little League games and so on, and stopped right there in front of our building. A little further down, all there was a berm, a hot top berm, and would channel the water down to a channel. Well, the berm over the years got hit by plows, et cetera, and is gone. And what happens is the water just cascades over and starts eroding under the, undermining the pavement, and the pavement's giving way, so there's nothing stopping. What we're afraid of is on a slippery, if it gets slippery, or even when the town highway department plows, there's a chance they could slide and end up actually somebody down at the softball field. We looked at different ways of correcting the problem. The best way is granite curbing. We're going to get extra high curbing so they can go in the ground 2 feet, secure it with concrete, and then repave it, channeling the water to the funnel. And we're actually, the highway department's going to put in a catch basin there and run it to the nearest drain, because right now the water funnels down into the softball field and it puddles right at home plate. So once we repair this with the curbing, the highway department will put in drainage for the softball field.
And that's included in the 25,000?
So that's, well, that's included in the 155, correct. So it's 130 for the high school curbing and the paving, and 25,000 to correct the IGO problem. All right. The next one is the IGO floor tiles. Obviously, when the building was redone, 1994 reopened, as a cost-saving measure and as a time saver, they carpeted right over the existing VAT tile. And the rugs right now are beginning to show their age. The ones in the corridor did a few years ago, so we've replaced all the corridor tile. I believe it was 3 years ago. Boy, time flies when you're having fun. 3 years ago, we ripped up all the corridor carpeting and abated the VAT tile, replaced it with VCT tile. The following year, the very next year, we did 15 classrooms in the oldest wing. The problem was fortunately, there was no VAT under them, but they were old wood floors that they put plywood down and then carpeting. Problem was now every time we shampooed the rug, the wood would tend to go up, and I'd get, rises, so we had to cut the rug, re-screw the wood, re-glue the rug down. Finally, that rug looked terrible. That was replaced 2 years ago. This year, we'd like to do the remainder of the classrooms. There's 15 classrooms in the what I call the newer wing, 52 wing, which have VAT tile underneath. So we want to remove the carpet, abate the VAT tile, replace it with VCT. We'll also do some offices and some storerooms. So the only place that VAT tile will remain is in the library, and that has carpeting. So we'll come back in the next year or two. The reason we don't want to do it or asking for it all at once now is I would have no place to put all those books and all this furniture as we abate, because I have to remove it completely out of the area so they can seal it off and do the abatement. So I'm going to end up filling the gym and the cafeteria downstairs with all of the furniture from the classrooms, and I'd have no place to put all these books, so it's a time factor and so on. So we're going to come back at a later date and ask to do the same thing to the library. So the cost of that is $130,000.
Mike, just a question
Yeah.
for you. Paul and I have talked about this, and I know he was going to talk to you. We've had questions raised here multiple times about handicapped accessibility in our buildings. And we've been asked to evaluate what we have and don't have to comply. Where do we stand on that? Because I notice, it's not in the fiscal 2008 or 9 or 10. So can you is it appropriate to enlighten us as to why we've not, either we've given consideration and decided not to do it, or we haven't given consideration to that?
Okay. The buildings, when they were built, met the current ADA codes at the time. So obviously, the Ahern School met the current code. Bathrooms, hardware on the doors, even the classroom identification has Braille. Any storage department, they all have the Braille. That building meets the current code. When this building was built, it met the code that was in place at the time. I've had the building inspector up here with the ADA code, and he walked through with me. Said to me, right now, your building is in compliance. Now, compliance to the old code. The minute we do, I believe the threshold is $100,000 of renovation, and I'm not counting roofs, but when we start remodeling, et cetera, that triggers the new code or upgrade. So we would have to do some of our bathrooms, although we do have handicapped accessible bathrooms. We miss a couple of the heights by 1.5 inches, so we'd have to raise the lower toilets by 1.5 inches. We met them in the old code, not the new one. Every doorknob in the school here would have to have, rather than a doorknob, would have to have a handle. All the sinks would have to have paddles, et cetera, and doorways changed and so on. So right now, this building does meet accessibility codes under the old code.
Did you at least explore what the cost would be to make, even though we're in compliance in the two buildings, what it would cost to make them handicapped accessible? At least one door?
You mean the entrance door?
The entrance door.
Our entrance doors are, because right now, he used a pressure gauge to push, and that's what you gauge it at. How hard is the pull and how hard is the push?
Okay.
See, automatic doors are not required. That's not a requirement. The Ahern School doesn't have them.
No, I
And that's built under-
understand that.
That's built under the new code.
We've had a citizen who's come to us a number of times to discuss his inability to enter the buildings and the difficulty with someone having to let him in. Maybe there's a citizen that opens the door for him, et cetera. I think everybody knows what I'm referring to. And I at least thought we would, I guess legally you're saying we're in compliance, but he was asking us to give consideration to what it would cost to make accessibility easier for people like himself. And I didn't know whether we had come up with any cost or any estimate to do that.
No.
I wonder if it isn't a safety issue too, because I don't think, if you're going to lock a school and have buzz-in, in order to get into the building, you can't just put, I wouldn't think you could just put a door that would push a button and open it, whether you were handicapped or not. That would, because anybody could do it. So I don't see that as a necessity or people allowing it in school buildings per se, because you want to know who's coming in out that door, whether they're handicapped or not. So then being able to buzz.
It would have to be deactivated, correct.
Yeah, that's the only other option, is to have it deactivated so that somebody could open the door. But, you're still going to have to buzz in and say who you are. So therefore, somebody could come and open the door either way. So I think that it might be more safe.
I guess the question, how many schools would you like to, if we do it at one school, do we have to do it at all 5?
Right, and I guess all I'm asking is, he has come to several of our meetings, and he's asked for consideration, and I think that it's appropriate for at least administration to sit down and understand the nature of his requests, what the cost of his request would be, and then making sure that the committee has a chance to evaluate that when we do all of our capital. I'm not saying that I would support the request, but I'm saying I certainly support his request to look at it, period.
We'd have to incorporate our security system somehow in it. With today's technology, I'm sure there's a way around it. So we could look at, the problem being, especially at the Ahern, you have to do 2 doors, because there's an alcove.
Right.
So you'd have to do both doors.
Right.
The outside door and the inner door. So we'd have to look at both. Of course, the inner one wouldn't have to be locked, just the outer door.
Right.
So Yes, we can look at that.
I mean, as long as, I just would like us to engage in a conversation with the individual so that we understand what his needs are and others that are in a situation, and he understands what our constraints are from a security standpoint, from a budget standpoint, what other communities do or don't do. And I think if we engage in a positive dialogue, it goes a long way to building the right relationship, that's all.
Sure, we can do that. Okay, copiers, Paul, you can speak on that? I don't do copies.
And I just want to say, Martha, I agree with you, I think there's a security issue. I also think it's very appropriate, Larry, for us to bring this up and discuss it, because I think when you realize to make it equitable across 5 buildings would cost X amount, I think we have finite choices here, but I applaud you. I think it's good that we discuss it so that we do have an answer because of security and because of what the issues are, that we can have that dialogue. My only other question, I just want to be clear, for that 100,000, because our capital is usually over that, when I look at the high school curbing, that's not remodeling, that's repair.
Exactly.
Okay, the same with the IGO floor tile, when we did the borough, when we do the Taylor, that's called remediation
Right.
and abatement, so that's not remodeling.
Exactly.
So it's the 100,000 for remodeling.
Right, we
That sets
haven't
the
triggered
threshold.
any thresholds. Floor replacement, roof replacement, curbing, paving, and so on does not trigger it. So.
Just wanted to have that clarified, thank you, Mike.
And again, the IGO, there's so many ADA codes. It was the early one that this building was built in. The IGO is compliant with the code that was in effect in 1994.
Always going to be changing.
Copies?
Same information that we've provided in the last several years. We currently do 6 million impressions on the copy machines on a district-wide basis. We have Canon machines, and we have, Konica. And so we're using some Konicas. The majority of the machines that we have are Canon. Both manufacturers have indicated that the expected useful life of the machine starts to deteriorate at about 2 million, and if you're really lucky, you can squeeze 3 million impressions out of the machine before they would consider it to be worn out. We do have a maintenance agreement in terms of we pay per click charge. It's from the state bid for both Konica and for Canon. So that one could argue they would service the machine forever. But at some point, they're going to say to us, we won't service the machines at this point because we're out here every day and we're not going to do it. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but it starts to become inconvenient for the staff. So I've asked for a couple copiers again this year. We really need to stay current. We need to buy 2 a year. Now, Canon, the local dealers, Icon, has come out with a program that they just came out with a month or so ago, where they have taken some relatively new machines, I want to say they're 2-year-old machines, and they have gone through the machines from soup to nuts, and they've certified them, and they'll provide service to us based on the state click charge for the state bid price for the maintenance. And the price is just shy of $5,000 per copier, so that versus about $15,000 if I had to replace it new, with a network board and with a collator and stapler. The same, we've got some of these machines now that we're running. So they have assured me that they've gone through these from top to bottom and basically have rebuilt the machines. I'd like to get a little bit more information. They've sent me some information. The literature they sent me was just generic. I need to have a few more conversations with the rep and would come back to the committee if it looks feasible to say, instead of trying to buy a couple of new ones at approximately $15,000 a piece, that we pick up 2, maybe 3 reconditioned units for $5,000 a piece. Would be a $15,000 expenditure, and give them a try.
Is there any way of finding out if anybody else?
Well, the program is so new, the chances are they haven't been out there long enough. It will be a year from now when you know that there's going to be a
Well,
problem.
then, if we do this, we can tell people whether or not it's a good idea.
Absolutely. And,
It'll be the
So-
time.
Charge them for it, right, Martha?
there's a possibility that if the committee agreed, we could reduce this and purchase it again out of building rental or purchase out of operating, and then ultimately reduce the CIP request. School buses, This year, we purchased a full-size 77-passenger bus, which we are on the street right now to bid. We purchased a 35-passenger bus, which is kind of halfway between the minibuses we've bought in the past and the full-size buses. And then we purchased a minibus. The two minibuses have been awarded, and they have been ordered. The proposal this year is, instead of buying 3, which really, to keep the fleet current and no older than 9 years, we need to buy 3 a year. But if you remember, we did reroute and schedule the town, and we eliminated one of our full-size buses, and we also eliminated the Metco bus, which really means on a day-to-day basis we're using 2 less buses. In recognition of that, I'm requesting 2 school buses this year instead of 3. And one would be a minibus with a wheelchair lift that we would replace a unit that is a model year 2000 that has just shy of 100,000 miles on it, and probably at this point it's got more than 100,000 miles. And replace that with a new one that would, this bus would have a wheelchair lift, and the estimated cost is $60,000. And then replace one of the full-size 77-passenger buses that currently has about 115,000 miles on it, and the estimate is $75,000. In the last few years, we've seen some significant increases in the cost of the vehicles. There have been more safety features, but also more pollution features that have been added to the bus, which drives the price. They have new particulate filters now in the diesel buses that have added quite a cost. So the request for those 2 buses would be $135,000, and the intent would be to trade in the buses that we have. And quite frankly, if in discussions as we get closer to when we would actually bid this, and it would be my intent to bid this, assume if we have positive recommendation by CIP, I'd probably put the bid out before town meeting with a clause that said subject to funding at town meeting, so that we can get these ordered as soon as possible. At that point, I'd have a further discussion with Glenn at the Highway Department to determine if we should turn in 2 of the full-size buses, the old ones, as opposed to 1. I don't see the need of maintaining the stock even as spares at this point, but I'd want to have a discussion with him. It's nice to have the safety. We'd have to weigh the cost of the trade-in. Computers, you'll see on each one of the years, we've got about 1,400 computers. We had used the number of 250 last year to maintain a fleet of 6 years or younger. I personally still think 6 years is too long. We're asking for funds to purchase 233 computers this year, along with some printers and some software. Total request would be $180,000. And this is along with the school buses, copiers. This would be a reoccurring item.
Where will they be going?
Pardon?
Where will these computers be going?
It will round out and take care of the balance of all the elementary schools, and that next year's request we start to chip away at the middle school.
Paul, I have a question. On the software, from Paul Bertolotti's presentation to us, we know that we need to do a lot with technology infrastructure on software, disaster recovery, a whole range of things were mentioned. When you say software here, will we have enough to take a stab at really hitting the technology infrastructure of what we need for software system-wide, or that this capital request doesn't even touch that?
It will touch it to a certain extent. We've got some money this year that we'll be using to address one of the issues that we've had in the past. We've had upgrades to the operating systems of the computer, and that's a licensing issue when you do that. With the new machines, we've bought XP Professional, so that all of the 350 machines that we purchased this year, or purchased last year, that we've installed this year, have XP Professional on it. We need to start to take a look to upgrade to the latest version of Office, and I think at this point this will still put us in good stead. I've heard some and read some documentation regarding the new version of Office that they said the whole look and the feel of it is entirely different, and what scares me is the cost of the district would be considerably more than just the purchase of the software. That with the look and the feel of this product, we'd have a huge training issue, because it looks so much different, so that
Well, I'm not advocating moving to the new software yet. I don't buy things until they've been a couple of years, so I'm not sold on Microsoft's new version, but I do want to make sure that we have enough software, particularly for the technology infrastructure, where disaster recovery, and there were like 5 different, it's not just, and the technology team has done a phenomenal job getting that up and running, patches, but there are things that we will need to continue to upgrade to, and I just want to make sure that this 180, in addition to the computers, that it is sufficient to upgrade what we need for software.
the town funded last year, we had an article for computers, desktops, and then we had an article for servers and backup and software. We haven't spent any of the money for the servers and the backup software at this point. Part of what we've been waiting for is the town has received proposals for the new townwide accounting system. And before we went out and bought servers and we bought backup and software programs for the disaster recovery, we wanted to wait and see what the requirements were going to be for this accounting system, and to make sure that we didn't buy a server that wasn't quite beefy enough, if you will, to handle the new process. The expectation is that we'll have that money spent probably close to the end of the year, and it will take care of our immediate needs for the infrastructure in terms of backup, disaster recovery, servers, and the latest software in terms of the operating systems for those servers.
Excellent, thank you.
Taylor School Program, playground?
Want to go 09?
Yeah, well,
No, that concludes 08.
yeah, that, okay, I'm sorry. So the descriptions here have concluded in '08. If you want us to continue going over the narratives for '09 and further, we can at this point.
Why don't you just highlight them by name and not go through the narrative? Just so that people have an idea of what we're looking down the road.
In '09, we'd like to propose redoing the Taylor Playground. It's, constructed of old tires and so on, which are no longer legal. We'd ask about $50,000 for there. High school tennis courts. They're starting to deteriorate. We patch them. Cracks just keep redeveloping and so on. The fencing, you see how bad rusted it is and so on. So we'll propose to replace the high school tennis courts. We do have a girls and a boys tennis team who use all the courts, and the public uses them 8 months of the year. So that's our best guess is about $150,000. Hot water tanks at the high school. We have 2 huge hot water tanks, 1,000-gallon tanks that obviously we don't utilize a third of that. They're very expensive to run. We have to run the boilers in order to get hot water. So we propose replacing those with 2 smaller gas-fired, quicker recovery, less storage, less energy. We estimate about $65,000. Taylor School floor tiles. Part of the school was abated many years.
Would the gas company ever have any incentives to switch to something like that?
No, not really. We're going to look at it. We're doing, obviously doing energy audits in every
Yeah.
one of the buildings, so we're going to double back. I mean, they did give us money towards the new burners, and they ran my gas main when we did convert to gas.
Now that they're here.
They're here. So now what we want to do is hit them with, what incentive will you give us to put gas-fired hot water heaters in, and what incentive would you give us to convert our kitchen equipment from electric to gas as we need to and replace it and so on. So we're going to just, we have something
Okay.
at least to entice them to come in and talk to us. Taylor School floor tiles, about half the school still has VAT tile. We just did the library school vacation. That rug was deteriorating badly. So we decided to take it up. Obviously, when we took up the rug, there was VAT tile there, so we completely abated that, put down new carpeting. So that's done. There are...
Mike, can I interrupt you for a
Yep.
second? We originally slated to replace the tile and the carpet at the Borough School, but the carpet at the Borough School Library had been replaced just several years ago, and it was still in really good shape. And the concern was that we were going to rip up and throw away a perfectly good carpet, take the tile up, and then put another carpet down. The carpet at the Taylor School Library was really deplorable. so that instead of doing the borough, we switched over and yanked the carpet at Taylor, took the VAT up and put a new carpet down at Taylor. At some point in the future, we'll have to go back and do borough, but similar to what Mike described at the IGO school, we wouldn't do that until such time as the carpet required to be replaced. So that's why the Taylor was done this year and not the borough.
So slowly but surely, we'll be getting rid of all the VAT tile in the schools. 2010 Taylor School paving. Obviously, the parking lots are deteriorating a little bit more every year. The curbing, walks, etc. So that would be replaced. 2011, we'll do the borough paving. And also in 2011, we figure the borough roof would be in need of replacement by then. We've done the seams and so on. When we looked at it, they estimated we could get about 6 or 7 more years out of it, and by FY11, it will probably be in need of replacement. And then shortly thereafter, that would be this roof.
In 2011?
And this one, hopefully, we can go to 2012. This one's going to be a very expensive roof to replace. So we're going to do some repairs. We're going to spend a little money over the next few years to obviously extend the life of it. The membrane is still in pretty good shape. Seams and some flashing have to be redone. So we'll just continually over the years just spend some money just to prolong the life of it. We don't want to put in a tremendous amount of dollars, but obviously we don't want it leaking either. So we'll try to extend the life of it as long as we can.
Mike, when we do the borough paving, is there any way we can widen that? Do we own that plan for that entry for those buses? That's a one in and out.
Oh, yeah,
It is
we
now. We have to
own
widen.
land on both sides.
Okay.
Oh, that's no problem.
Yeah, because I come down that street and I watch the buses try to come out.
Yeah, that's another one that has
It's the
to
same thing.
come out almost out into the
Yes,
other lane to make the turn. Oh, absolutely.
okay.
Yep.
The high school roof in the 2011 timeframe, we would hope that that would be part of the package we would put together with the state, that we'd be asking for all the renovations. As we said at our last meeting, we will take the next probably 2 years to really labor with the state to find out whether they'll fund or not fund. But ultimately, if the state doesn't fund improvements at the high school,
Still gonna be done.
we have to be prepared to work with the selectmen and to work with the voters in town, because the building will continue to age, and we will continue to need a roof and heating system and other things. So I guess the key message to the voters at home, to the taxpayers, to the students, to the parents, is that we will take the next 2 years to build the business case and work very hard with the state to get as much funding from the state as possible. But if the state does not come through with funding, there will be a time when we're going to have to go to the voters and ask them for money to renovate the high school as it surpasses its 40-year mark. Those science labs have not been updated, and like people's homes, their windows don't last 40 years, kitchens don't last 40 years, bathrooms don't last. So we've got a great life out of this building, and the maintenance folks have done a great job with it. But I want the taxpayer to know that we're talking now about the eventual cost, and we'll do everything we can to get the state to help us. But if the state doesn't, we're going to be coming back to the voters at some point and asking for their help.
I think every year when we do our CIP, we just have to keep hitting home that it's on the radar screen, it has to be done. And we can never let this building become the horror show that the Ahern became. We just cannot let it happen. And we can't keep postponing it so that if in the event we do it, it's going to wind up costing us twice as much by waiting. So it's going to have to be done in a timely fashion.
Any other questions?
Very nice job, Mike.
Thank you.
As always, thank you, Mike.
So at the end of the package, there's the Excel spreadsheet with a list year over year of the items on the CIP list. The FY08 request to summarize: IGO classroom, remove and replace the VAT, high school paving and curbing, the repair to the IGO paving, district-wide computers and software upgrades, 2 buses and some copiers. Total request $627,000.
2 Do we need a?
If you were to do the copiers separately, then it would be under 600,000 we'd be requesting for capital.
Yes.
Do you need a motion to approve this?
Yes, we do, I believe. So we can bring it forward to the CIP
CIP.
committee. Any questions? Do I have a motion?
I would move to approve.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ahern Middle School Revised School Improvement Plan.
If I may introduce, please.
Yep.
Ms. Abrams is going to come to the microphone. The committee has had an opportunity to take a look at all of the work that Ms. Abrams has put in. Through the strategic planning process, we listened to parents, we made notes, we took a look at other districts, district improvement plans and school improvement plans, and we are launching the first school improvement plan. The committee accepted the school improvement, the district strategic plan in January, and I know you're waiting for the district improvement plan. It all needs to umbrella pieces that fit together here. But I just want to publicly thank Sue for all the work that she put into this. This is an extraordinary amount of work because she was the first, and it's whenever you are the first, you have to play with all the different things that we wish we could have, that we could put into there, all of the thoughts. She's brought it back to the administrator several times. We worked out some bugs. I'm just trying to plan out the whole format, all the things that need to be put into it. So the administrative team and Sue have worked extensively on this. The reason the Ahern School is first on this is because, as we unfortunately have mentioned several times, the Ahern School did not make AYP this year because of special ed mathematics grades 6 through 8. And that required that the Ahern School then revise their school improvement plan. So the one that they wrote in the spring was no longer sufficient. One of the things that they had to do was to revise. Sue has taken a long, hard look at all of our data. She has put together this plan with the help. She'll go through the whole process with the help of her staff and the administration. She has taken this plan now to the school council, and it is important this evening that the school committee accept her plan or make any suggestions for revision. Savings.
Before you start, let me just also say that as one of the liaisons on the strategic planning representing parents, Dr. Norton met with a number of parents at my home one evening to discuss the process and the frustration parents were having. And what we heard over and over and over again were that the school improvement plans dealt with less than intellectual issues. And that what they wanted to see were hard-hitting plans that would address current metrics. For instance, when you talk about we're at 78.1, the goal is now to get to 81.72 and 83.58. It's not a matter of arguing whether or not those percentages are right or wrong. What the parents were saying is they wanted to start to see where the administration would draw the line and say, here's where we are today, here's where we want to be a year from today, here's where we want to be 2 years from today, and here are the strategies we'll share with you on how to do that. And I want to commend you for listening to the criticism and for doing what you've done to put together the plan to address in an open and honest way what the parents were asking for a long period of time. And for those parents that served with me and those that filled out surveys, I hope they'll take the time to ask for a copy of this and read this, because this is exactly what they were asking for. And when we do this across all the schools, it's going to be a huge step forward in transparency and accountability, and I want to commend you personally for all the work you did to get this document before us tonight. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I just want to assure everyone, when this is taken care of, they don't need a copy of it. We will be posting this on the website.
Excellent.
Perfect.
And what you have is the academic piece, the first part, not the other three less academic pieces.
Right.
But first, I would like to thank all the people who worked very diligently to put this together. The superintendent and the administrative team, the curriculum directors, the Ahern staff, the Ahern School Council, and a special thanks to Dr. George Ladd, who is a professor at Boston College and the director of the Data Analysis and Strategic Planning Project, who consulted with us on this first school improvement plan. First, we received our MCAS data in the aggregate and met with curriculum directors, school administrators, staff. We met at grade level meetings, content meetings, staff meetings. We discussed item analyses and planned improvement to reflect the needs that were identified by these analyses. We looked at teacher reports, we looked at Terra Nova data, we looked at everything that we could get our hands on to help process the performance of our students on the MCAS tests. Dr. Ladd met with the administrators and did a workshop for us on this type of presentation, which follows the performance improvement mapping, and shared with us and discussed areas that we could focus on. He also met with the Ahern School Council to provide assistance for school improvement planning that went beyond the academic piece that you have in front of you. The Ahern did not make adequate yearly progress in the special education subgroup as defined by the No Child Left Behind Act, but I do need to tell you that the Ahern School did make adequate yearly progress in the aggregate. So overall, performance met the standards, but in the specific subgroup it did not. So I'd like to turn over to page 3, if you would. Make one small correction on the second line if you did not get an updated copy, and change the word comprehensive to composite, because it is a composite performance index. And I'd like to explain how we get the numbers that are our goals. This is a prescribed improvement, and I'll just walk you through that at first. I'd like to tell you that the target for the state in math for the cycle that the past MCAS test was 68.7. Foxborough's score was 78.1, so it was significantly above the state target. And the target for math for the next 2-year cycles is 76.5, which we're still above in the aggregate. However, to calculate the figures, the percentage of increase, you need to take 100. We need to reach 100 by 2014, and we're at 78.1. So if you subtract 78.1 from 100, you get 21.9 points that we have to make by 2014, measured in 2-year cycles. So for there are 4 2-year cycles. So in each of the 2-year cycles, we need to make 5.475 points. But 2/3 of those points have to be made in the first year of the 2-year cycle, which would be 3.613 points. So the 78.1 plus 3.613 is 81.72, and that's our particular improvement target. So the numbers in the goal statement simply follow the formula that the state gives us and tells us where we should be. The special education subgroup had a lower percentage, and they're mentioned, although school improvement plans are done in the aggregate, so they have a larger jump to make and more points to achieve their improvement target. From the information that we had, we derived our target areas. If you turn to page 4, our first target area in math is related to the information that's given to us. And our first target area is the understanding and facility with the concepts of fractions, decimals, and percent. That was found to be a difficulty at the middle school, and in conversations with the other schools, that those underlying features display themselves in the elementary schools as well. For the target area, we defined 3 root causes. The root causes are listed, and then the instructional changes are numbered to reflect how they're going to address the root cause. So for root cause number 1, for example, one of the problems with the students having difficulty with fractions, decimals, and percent is insufficient remediation capacity to address the students who have not achieved mastery. So an instructional change is to assess and remediate the gaps in student understanding through benchmark testing. As you go through the root causes, the instructional changes relate to the root cause, and then a student learning objective is what you would expect the students to learn if you address the root cause by the learning objectives, and that would also be numbered 1. So the cause of the difficulty, why you have the target, has the instructional change that will help fix the cause of the difficulty, the learning objective that you would want to be the result of the instructional change, the strategies that you're going to use to achieve that instructional change. And the relationships are shown by the numbering for each one. If you turn over to page 8, the second target area is to improve student understanding and ability to interpret and utilize graphic representations of linear relationships in graphs, charts, diagrams, stem and leaf plots, scatter plots, and line graphs. This is a math target, but also harkens to some of the difficulties that students demonstrate in nonfiction understanding, and whether they're reading a social studies text and they see a chart or a graph. It is also represented in nonfiction strategies, test-taking strategies, and it is a difficulty on student SAT data. So that, for example, the root causes, number 1 is insufficient curriculum and instructional materials related to multiple representations of linear relationships to utilize for basic understanding. It has the instructional change objectives, the learning objectives, and the strategies that teachers will use. And some of this lends itself perfectly to science and social studies, where there's a lot of interdisciplinary work right now. Timelines, graphs, charts. The science teachers, when they're doing experiments, will record the data, making sure that with the math teachers, the students have addressed this. So there's a lot of unity in terms of working on these math targets, not just in the math, but in science, social studies, foreign language. Students turn their grades into fractions, decimals, percents, whichever is not there, to try to achieve those goals. Page 12 starts the ELA goal statements. And again, we wish to improve our performance. Although we are significantly above the state target and only have a few points to go, in the grades 3 to 5, where we're now measured as a district, that was the first time that grades 3 to 5 had some difficulty in ELA, and some of those foundations are reflected back and forth between the elementary schools and the middle school. The target areas are consistent with the elementary schools and also support some of the weaknesses that we find in their test taking and their math. The first ELA target was to identify, analyze, and apply knowledge of the purposes, structure, and elements of nonfiction or informational materials and provide evidence from the text to support their understanding. That again is data, nonfiction reading strategies, utilizing text features, graphs, charts, diagrams, going back into the text and reading carefully. Those are the things that we found the students did not do, and they specifically did not do that very well on their science MCAS test, where we, through analysis, determined that much of the difficulty they were having was not with the scientific concepts, but with the going back into the text, looking at the charts and diagrams, and the reading portions of it. Page 16 has ELA Target 2, to improve student use of strategies for inferential thinking in order to improve student performance. The inferential thinking is the application of the knowledge that they've gained through their reading. If we ask low-level questions and ask for simply facts or data or the same word, they're able to do that. But the test does not test those low-level questions or parroting back rote information. They are testing their interpretation of vocabulary, the subtle nuances of the language, so that the students are expected to read, comprehend, and then apply and use in a new way. So that is one of the strategies that we are doing, because they did not do as well as we would have wanted them to do. Page 19 addresses test-taking strategies. And it's framed in terms of open response questions, because in terms of the item analysis, the open response questions ask for a great deal of thought, following directions, applying the knowledge, reading, and if you look at page 20, the first target area was to improve student written responses to open response questions and short answer questions by answering the question being asked with sufficient detail. Putting in the points, understanding what the question is asking, not writing down what they wish to write down, but writing down the question, the answer to the question that's being asked with what they're being asked to do. And we've done a lot of work with helping students follow directions in class so they can follow directions of the question. Test-taking strategies area 2 on page 22 is to improve student ability to use a variety of active reading comprehension and test-taking strategies to understand directions and correctly answer the questions. This was a difficulty that they demonstrated on the MCAS test as we analyzed the information, and we're working with the staff on professional development and helping the teachers teach the students how to apply active reading strategies and to understand the test-taking strategies and to be more test savvy in the MCAS format. And everybody's working very diligently, actively reading, doing, working with the kids on trying to help them better understand what it is they're asked to do and answer it more precisely and completely in all content areas. And I think we've done a lot of work. We've come a long way. Some of the heartening information is that on some of the benchmark tests, in 6th grade, the average of the benchmark test for the first benchmark test was in the 40s, and the second benchmark test was in the 70s, and we're waiting for the third benchmark test to be given, which helps us to see an improvement in math scores as well as overall improvement in all the facets that would indicate and impact their performance. So I hope they can do that again in the end of March and the end of May.
I had a question for you. We've talked about this a number of times, and as I say, this is fabulous. It really is. But we're still benchmarking in many cases to state averages. We've talked about the fact that the state includes Lawrence and Lowell and Springfield and other things, which really bring it down. And I believe a month or two ago when we were looking at Terra Nova, we were looking at some of the local communities similar to Foxborough, either spend more per pupil or less per pupil. Mm-hmm. Would it be possible, as we work forward for the rest of these, if we as a school committee and an administration were to agree on some benchmark communities, I don't know whether it's 3, 5, 7, whatever it might be, to track how we're doing? Is it possible to track how we're doing against those communities, not just the state average? Because those communities that are spending similar funds that we have a similar composite of students that we have, are a better representation of how we're doing than just looking at state averages. So is that possible?
It is possible. One of the reasons that we chose to use the CPI is it is what the state requires us to do. What it says is, and again, just reiterating what Sue was explaining, under No Child Left Behind, we're expected to have 100% of our students by 2014 reach proficiency. The state has said it needs to be in increments for us to get to that point. So it sets targets. Those are reasonable targets that we feel that we can make. We certainly can give you the data to say how we're doing against somebody else, but the targets need to say, all right, we can't shoot for, if we're at 78% now, we can't shoot for 90 in a year's time. What we need to be shooting for is in the increments in order to make those. So that's the reason why this plan is in compliance with what the state is expecting us to write in an SIP, and that is to make those stage changes. Can we provide information about how we are compared to others? Certainly we can. I wouldn't suggest it for a goal.
I think the state is the floor. It's not what people in Foxborough expect or should expect. And so when you look at similar communities that are spending the same amount of money, we should be getting results equal to or better than them, plus or minus a few percent. And so to me, while I understand we have to do it the way the state does it, but just to be average is not what I think the average taxpayer, the average parent in town wants to see. So if we can constantly pick the benchmarks, whatever they might be, it's certainly not a Wellesley, but pick those benchmarks that are reasonable and show the taxpayer how we're doing with our dollars versus how they're doing with their dollars per student. It's not an exact science, so it's not one that you should say just because the numbers are X and Y, but it ought to be a benchmark that allows us to look at how well we're doing with our $22 million that we're getting from the taxpayer and investing in the education with how other communities are doing it. One of the things that you've recommended in our budget this year is you went to other communities and you saw what some of the things they were doing to address some of the areas we have weaknesses, and you proposed math specialists and English specialists. Excellent idea. If we're going to go to other communities and we're going to borrow their good ideas, and they're going to come and borrow our good ideas, because we have some as well, then we should be benchmarking against those communities so we can see the impact that it's having. And when you bring innovation and creativity to the community, we should somehow try to measure that.
There's and we certainly can give you the numbers. I have no problem giving you the numbers at all. It's just understanding where we are in the game.
Yeah.
We should be using the same data. The CPI is the best way to make the comparisons, not the MCAS scores, but the CPI, because the CPI takes into consideration all of our students. What you don't see hidden, there was a recent editorial and it said, all right, we have all of these children that are in needs improvement. But if you break those scores down, you see that in so many cases we have students that are right on the edge of being proficient. And CPI takes that into consideration because they give us 100 points for proficiency, 75 points for the upper needs improvement, et cetera, and works its way down, as well as include, we have a very large population of special ed students, so it includes those. So, going forward as a comparison basis, we'd be more than happy to be providing to you the CPIs. Because that gives us a level. That's the plan from No Child Left Behind, and it's the best place for us to put in a comparison. I will say, too, I firmly believe that we are definitely moving forward with leaps and bounds at this point, but we are behind districts that had curriculum cycles so that they were every year reviewing, taking a look at the curriculum, finding out where we are, tweaking, buying new programs. As I've mentioned before, we are at a very painful point for our elementary school teachers. God love them. We just put in a new English language arts program, K through 6. I'm hearing grand things about it. The teachers are working very, very hard on it, and they will be meeting soon to talk about what they liked and what are the things that need to change, tweak that, and get the curriculum put together for English language arts. Mathematics is right behind it. But those are the two big animals. Those are the two big animals. The other districts that, when we keep putting up the numbers and we're looking at it and we're saying, what happened to us? They had a program in place. They continued the curriculum development. They kept going back and looking at it. They kept going back and tweaking it and making the changes, supplementing where necessary. And we have been lax in that.
Yes, we have.
And so it's going to, just to have everybody understand, it's going to take us a little time to get caught up. We have a wonderful start going on it. We have a plan. There's a direction. We know exactly what's going to be reviewed, and when it will be reviewed. We've already been looking at the teams that are in place. I'm thrilled with the work that has already been done for the review that we're doing for high school, 7 through 12 English language arts right now. As the teachers are meeting, we're understanding again what we suspected is being confirmed, and we're learning a few more things that are helping us put things into place appropriately. We have not done this in the past. I'm very pleased with the work we've done, but I just wanted to throw in a word here. I'll provide the CPIs, be more than happy to provide that for you. I will tell you now, it's going to take us a little time to get caught up, but we're moving in that direction.
I wasn't asking you to get caught up overnight.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the taxpayer would like to see us, they would like to see a report card. And if we're making progress, that's what's important. But if we just compare to the state averages, we're not giving them the full picture. So I know it would take time, and I know we've all been critical of the lack of things in the past and the lack of curriculum update and those kinds of things. But we're trying to look forward.
That's right.
And we're trying to invest going forward, and that's why we pushed support for the budget, et cetera. So if we're going to do all that, then if we could have that extra measure
Sure,
to help
be
the
happy
voter
to.
understand that they're getting a return and that we're moving in the right direction. Whether the pace is fast enough or not, everyone's going to have a different viewpoint. As I said, I don't care whether the numbers are right or wrong right now. We are drawing lines in the sand. We're moving forward. We're going for the hill. We're going to take it. We're going to get better, and that's what people are asking for.
Jan, one other thing I would love to see us do, and I think it's very possible, hopefully, class of 2007
Yes.
is graduating.
Yes.
Going back, moving forward, whatever. I would love to see how the class of 2007 did. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Did they go up? Did they go down? I don't like comparing second grades to second grades. I would like to see how did this class start? And I'm not asking for this year, but in the future, I would love to see us track classes. In other words, the graduating class of 2008. How did they do in kindergarten, first grade, second grade?
In regards to what, Martha?
Right up to graduation.
No, how did they do
Testing.
using what?
Testing.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Well,
whether
of course,
it's
it would
MCAS
start
or-
with grade 3.
Right, because the problem is, when I look at it, and when I'm looking at grade 5 and trying to look back, well, have these kids improved? Did they gain? Did they lose from when they were tested in 3? I think it would be helpful for us to see how a class evolves over a period of time, right up to graduation, and see.
And
how
we
they
can
do.
actually do that for you, and I'd be more than happy to put that together for you for the class of 2007, because we have purchased the Test Whiz program,
Oh,
and
you
it allows
do
us to
something.
do a longitudinal study, so we'll spend a little time and put
But
that
I just
together
think
for you.
moving forward, maybe it's a good thing to do every year, not just
And,
that we can see.
and just so you understand that the old MCAS was reading in grade 3, English language arts and mathematics in grade 4. Then grade 5 was science and social studies, no math and English. Grade 6 was mathematics. Grade 7 was English language arts. The grade 8 was science and English language arts. And mathematics. And then, of course, nothing in 9, and then the big test in 10. So we have kind of a scattered history, but
But at least it would follow-
we can put those numbers
follow
together
class
because we
order.
like to do that. But what will be neat is going forward, now that all of the grades are being tested in both English and mathematics, we'll be able to watch it more closely and
I think
actually
with the MCAS
fix things as they
and
go.
whatever we're doing, follow that class all the way through, and let's see how they keep climbing. I don't want to see them go.
It'll
We just look
take
at
a
some of
while.
that data, and for students who we did not have each year, but students in grade 4, and students in grade 10, and 4, 6, 8, and 10 in the special education subgroup in math. And, that's part of the analysis in looking at the students longitudinally as well as looking at the individual classes.
For instance, next year, Martha, I love that idea. Next year, the class 2008 still hasn't had the full series of tests. Because remember, we implemented Terranovas along the way to fill in.
It just would be interesting to see how a
you will see
class,
that.
climbs up through the ranks to get up to the 12th grade. But I think it would give us a good feel for it too, because it's like, well, why was last year's scores higher than this year's scores? And I don't think it's fair to compare one second grade to last year's second grade. I would rather compare these children all the way through and make sure that we're seeing the improvement that we want to see, so by the time they get here, we know we've all accomplished something, not just the students. So.
Well, you'd also
Just
see
as a program.
longitudinal
Yeah.
assessments over time, which
Yeah.
would be a great way then to check in. I know that's something you, Dr. Norton, have talked to us about. That's a great way to show, are we getting a bang for our buck
Yeah.
with Terranovas, or do we want to switch, or how that is. I'd like to, if I may, just go back to one point that Larry made. We have a lot of various charts, MCAS, we have per pupil expenditures. We did all of this for the advisory committee. I would, to follow up on Larry's idea, I would love to have the administrators at your convenience really take a look at, it may be Hockomock Week, it may be some other schools based on, for instance, and I understand the article in the Foxborough Reporter, numbers are numbers, and you can do anything you want with numbers, but it didn't take into account the number of special ed students, which I bet if you ranked, we're still higher than many of the other schools mentioned. It didn't take into account some other things as well, and I would love to know from the administrators, what are those schools that you would compare based on our student profile, the number of special education, the number per pupil. And, to start there, Larry, if we're going to move in that direction, I'd love to hear from the administrator. What's your top 12 list?
Absolutely, or six,
because
whatever.
maybe Franklin is in, or maybe, Mansfield is, or it
There's
isn't. I would love to know.
just so many pieces that, and if you go onto the Department of Education website and you pull up every district and take a look at it, it's a case of choosing which are the pieces that you want to say, all right, those are the ones that are going to count. You can do it by the income in the town, by the college graduation level of the parents. You can do it by, again, the number of special ed students. You can do it by overall numbers of students. There are a myriad of them. So when we contact the Department of Education and say, can you put us in a like pool, you can pull up one or two pieces of it, but there's not another Foxborough. But we'll be more than happy to, we can run some numbers on some of the variables that perhaps you can all look at. Understand that there will never be a complete match, which is why we always have a
That's a great way to
CPI.
start the discussion. I'd love to hear from the educators, what, based on those important numbers, from your viewpoint of educators. And, should we be comparing ourselves to Mansfield, or is it Franklin, or we may find out, no, it's neither of those two towns. It's,
Well, the other thing is when you look at numbers, you're not going to compare yourself to a school that, if we test 225 students, we're not going to compare ourselves to a school that tests 125.
That's right.
Because the less students who take, the better, theoretically, the higher your scores are going to be. So you're going to look for how much money do you spend, how many kids are being tested, what's the socioeconomic, and how many special needs. And MCAS always used to be driven by regular students and then including special needs students. So you do have those two numbers that you can work from. So,
Again, the key is not to argue what the criteria are, but to agree at least what we think is reasonable. So if you said the number of parents that have a college degree, or look at income, if we pick those categories that we all collectively think is fair and reasonable, not everybody will agree, but most would say those are fair and reasonable, then we go and we look at the data. And the data will tell us whatever it tells us, and it's only meant as a yardstick. It's not meant as an exact science, and it's only there to guide us to what we're doing. And I think, as you go out to these communities and see what they're doing and bring back ideas, it's fabulous. And that's the innovation that we need to have in order to move our system forward. As you said, We've fallen behind in a number of areas, but we've got a team today that's committed to candid assessment, open dialogue of where our weaknesses are. I mean, you read your report, you talk about, grades that have dropped percentage points consistently. It's just very open, very candid, and allows the voter to see exactly what the situation is, but then what are you proposing to do to address it? And that's what's important.
Some of the comparisons we've done this year have been, very interesting for lots of conversational purposes. When EQA was here, which I'll address in other matters, they were talking about our curriculum, and they said, it's vertically and horizontally aligned, but then, there's a lot of towns that don't have any curriculum at all. So understanding we're being compared, we're looking at it and saying, we could do better in our curriculum. Holy cow, there's some pieces that are missing. On the other hand, compared to places that don't have any at all, it's an interesting look at it. When Andrea Platt has been here and talking about mathematics, she put up some interesting charts. And we shot for the W's. Let's go for the W's. They've got the best, high scores. What are they doing? And then so you look at their curriculum, you say, well, what are they doing so that if we don't look at how many more college graduates they have, or if we don't look at how many special ed students they have, but shoot for the people that are doing exceptionally well, what are they doing? It's telling us what they're doing in the curriculum. So those are models for us. We know that our students may be different, the makeup of our students may be different, and our backgrounds may be different, but it's also giving us that guidance of, so what are they doing, and as I explained a little bit earlier, that has pushed them over. Not that we can, because the difference is, differences in the makeup of our students is a little bit different from some of those areas, but we need to still shoot for it, and again, that's the goal of No Child Left Behind, and that's those incremental steps that will get us to it. We fully believe we are confident we're going to make annual yearly progress. We have 8 years out, and we're going to make it 100% proficiency. That's our goal.
We need to accept this, I understand.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Okay.
Can I ask one other quick question? Sure. I just want to make sure that I summarize correctly. I'm thrilled with what you've done and the level of detail, and I understand the reason that it needs to be revised and come before us. When you and your team of teachers and administrators and school council met with Dr. Ladd, this will be the format then. I mean, you were not only did an exceptional job, you're also the pioneer for all of our other towns. So now when we look at school improvement plans in June, they're going to follow this same format, and that fits in.
They will
We
all
have
look.
the strategic plan, we have the school improvement plan, and it'll all be consistent with the district improvement plan.
The district improvement plan, because I worked with Dr. Ladd, and I was telling him our animal was getting to be over 100 pages. I worked with him, and it will be broader necessarily to allow each school to have more movement. But you should see every school improvement plan will use this exact same format. Sue's done a wonderful job.
I like that. I like all the categories. Thank you for answering.
I would move to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
4 in favor, 1 absent.
Congratulations, Sue.
Thank you. Other matters. Who'd like to go first?
I got a bunch of stuff.
Oh. Take my shoes off.
We got the curtain.
Yeah.
Although it's cold out there. We've turned down the heat, I can tell.
I was going to bring a vest.
I'd be happy to give you my jacket. I'm getting warm over
No,
here.
we're going to be efficient.
Get mine back. We want the-
I know many of you saw in the newspaper that Sarah Bain, who is our girls basketball coach, is going to be named Women's Legend, and that is based on some records that she achieved actually here as a Foxborough student. I've asked Ms. Bain to join us at our next school committee meeting so that all of you can congratulate her, and maybe she can give us an idea of the presentation that she will receive at the Atlantic Coast Conference on March 3rd. So thanks, Sarah. You're making us all look good. EQA, thank you so much to all of the staff who put up without the administrators for for staff who had strangers come into their classrooms so that they could put together the study, for the custodians, for everybody that just really went out of their way to be welcoming and show Foxborough at its best. We had an initial conversation with them. There were 8 people who came to visit us. 3 of them visited with me. Said kind of gave me an idea of some of the things that they saw. What they saw were that our buildings are good, clean, and well maintained. Our children are happy and well behaved. I could stop there. We have strong achievement. Our curriculum is aligned vertically and horizontally. But again, they're comparing us to districts that don't have any at all. Our mentoring and professional development programs are informed and documented. Our decisions are data-based. Teachers' evaluations are based on effective teaching. The policy, on the more than negative side, our policy book is outdated, but it's underway, and they acknowledge that. Our purchasing procedures are in the process of being developed. We have not had a curriculum cycle. Understanding EQA was evaluating the previous 3 years, not this year, but we now have one, and it is effective. We need an accounting program, but again, Paul has been working with the town hall, and certainly hope that we will have one soon. We did not have a strategic plan, but we have one now. We do not have a district improvement plan, but one is being written, and they saw evidence of that in my office. The administrative turnover did not affect student achievement. The current administrative team is strong and well hired. We are missing documents, but most procedures are in place. The next step in the EQA process will be one of the officers for EQA will come and visit me. They said within a week. He did not come last week, so I presume he will be here this week. We'll take some more specific notes, and I'll give you a more elaborated accounting of that after I've met with him. But I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the department heads and our administrators. Because we're a small district and they don't want to take teachers out, it was our administrators over and over and over again. The school committee came in, all the different people that had to be interviewed. Thank you very much for your time. The impact on our schools during those 4 days was treacherous because the administrators, the principals weren't in their buildings. So they hurried up at the end of the day trying to fix things. Then we had one day on Friday, which was a little wild, and yesterday we were still panting, trying to get caught up on what we weren't able to do during those 4 days. But thanks to all the administrators and the school committee who came in, and I will let you know as soon as I have any more information. Again, congratulations to the cheerleaders. In my former life, I was administrator in charge of cheerleaders. I completely understand all that they went through for that competition. It's monumental. I am thrilled to announce that we had several students who went to the Scholastic Art Awards contest. Ashley Burns took in a piece for computer arts and received a gold key. That is the highest honor from the state. Michelle Cottle took in sculpture, and she received a gold key. Leah Daniels took in sculpture and received honorable mention. Dan Fitzgerald took in a painting and received honorable mention. Sarah Harris took in mixed media and received honorable mention. Eric Lawrence Jr. took in computer art and received a gold key. Matthew Pillsbury, digital photography, gold key. That means that we have 4 students whose work will be sent on to New York for a national competition. We're extremely proud of all of them. Congratulations. We do neat things in Foxborough. I have a check that we received from the Invencis. It is a contribution for the Ahern Middle School for their after-school program. It is at the amount of $10,000. I would like for the school committee to accept it so that we can have our after-school programs, please.
Move to accept?
I'll second that.
All those
I
in
read my
favor?
body.
That's wonderful.
Invensys has been a wonderful support. We can't run those after-school programs without them.
Okay.
They're making another huge contribution that I'll come to you for in the not-too-distant future. They're going to help us out extensively during the summer. We're going to continue the math camp that we started last year. It was a huge success. We're just in the process of putting all those things together. I received a nice note, if I can take just 1 second. It was from Pauline Hadley, who's a Foxborough resident, and it reads, "Dear Dr. Norton, I'm enclosing a copy of an email I received today. As I read this, I felt compelled to share it with teachers. I am not a teacher, nor do I have anyone in my immediate family who is a teacher. However, I feel that teachers are often taken for granted. We all need a pat on the back once in a while, and I think this accomplishes that very nicely. Therefore, I am sending this to you and hope that you will find it worthy of sharing with the teachers in the Foxborough schools." May I have a moment to read this?
Absolutely.
It's a story that some of us have heard before, but on the chance that some teachers out there haven't heard this recently, I think it's appropriate. It's an old story. The dinner guests were sitting around the table discussing life. One man, a CEO, decided to explain the problem with education. He argued, "What's a kid going to learn from someone who decided his best option in life was to become a teacher?" He reminded the other dinner guests what they said. He reminded the other dinner guests what they say about teachers: those who can do, those who can't teach. To stress his point, he said to another guest, "You're a teacher, Bonnie. Be honest. What do you make?" Bonnie, who had a reputation for honesty and frankness, replied, "You want to know what I make?" She paused for a second and then began. "Well, I make kids work harder than they ever thought they could. I make a C+ feel like the Congressional Medal of Honor. I make kids sit through 40 minutes of class time when their parents can't make them sit for 5 minutes without an iPod, GameCube, or a movie rental. You know what I make?" She paused again and looked at each and every person at the table. "I make kids wonder. I make them question. I make them criticize. I make them apologize and mean it. I make them have respect and take responsibility for their actions. I teach them to write, and then I make them write. I make them read. I make them show all their work in math. I make my students from other countries learn everything they need to know in English while preserving their unique cultural identity. I make my classroom a place where all students feel safe. I make my students stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag because we live in the United States of America. Finally, I make them understand that if they use the gifts they were given, work hard, and follow their hearts, they succeed in life." Bonnie paused one last time and then continued. "Then, when people try to judge me by what I make, I can hold my head up high and pay no attention because they are ignorant. You want to know what I make? I make a difference. What do you make?" So that's for all the teachers out there. Thank you, Ms. Hadley, for sharing with me.
Just about says it all.
I'm finished.
Oh, I see Paul over there raising his finger.
Two quick things. I just want to talk about enrollment. I know I bored you to death at the last meeting, but there was a discrepancy that came up. And last year, we had projected for '07 an expectation of 98 preschool students. And every year, the first day of school, there's an enrollment sheet that's taken, and then subsequently, the second week of school, I believe we take it, and then from there on, it's a monthly sheet. For some unknown reason, it was determined to record 112 students for preschool, even though we had originally projected 98. We recorded 112. It was the only number on the sheet that wasn't actual, where all the rest of the numbers are actual and go forward. But we recorded 112 in each of the first two sheets, which would be the first 2 weeks of school, the and the 14th. And then it dropped down to 95 after that, which accounts for this. There were 17 students that went missing. The 17 students were really never there to begin with. And when the sheet was put together, Pam was actually responsible for putting it together. And she questioned why we were recording 112 students when, in fact, we didn't have the 112. And I guess she didn't think it was right having the one number on there, and was basically said, no, let's keep the 112. And which I think was misleading, since we always use this sheet as actuals. And I just wanted to point out that we had projected a number that turned out to be relatively close. As of February, we have 103 students in the preschool, but for some unknown reason, and that varies. I mean, if you go back, 103 in January, 102 in December, 100 November, 95 in October. We're carrying 112, and so it looks like we're off 17, when in fact, from my perspective, they were phantoms, so they didn't exist.
Paul, what's important to me is that we had an employee who questioned the integrity of the report, was told, leave it as is, but still questioned it. And so while we can't change what happened, I want to reinforce with employees that work for us that they have an obligation to question the accuracy and the integrity of numbers and information. And I want to commend her for doing that. And I won't get into who told her to leave the number there or why they told her to leave the number there, but that was wrong. And I want to commend the employee for raising the issue to both you and for you to bring it to us where that 17 students was, because that was brought up at our last meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. And then, this is, I guess, what I would call bedtime reading. I happened to pick up
Good thing I like tea.
on one of my 211 emails that I went through today.
Oh,
There was an email, and there was a discussion from the Mass Department of Revenue. There was a hearing on January 16th, and they did some projections. As I skimmed through it, and I have to emphasize the word skim, it isn't something that I could readily understand without putting some thought to it. But I did think it was interesting where they did some comparative analysis of original projections, actual versus going forward, and thought it kind of gave some insight as to where we're going from a revenue standpoint in the state. So I printed out copies to share with the committee.
Does it come with a tutorial too?
It's very dry, but you can understand it.
I don't think it matters whether they sat in the back or the beginning.
Do we come to you with questions too?
Oh, no.
As long as I have lots of time to prepare the answer.
We'll email you the questions, Paul, okay?
Sure. But I thought it might be interesting.
Oh, my God.
Thank you.
Martha, I had just one item.
Okay.
Jan had, with all the work we're doing on drug and alcohol, she had reached out to an organization called Committee of Concern about some material that they have, and she has been able to obtain that. And I'll make sure that we get Katie her copy. But this little booklet here, you can actually customize the cover so you can pass it out with Foxboro kinds of things. But when you look inside, it is a great little booklet on the legal consequences beyond high school, parties, the social scene, signs and symptoms, how to communicate, the negative effects of substance abuse, why and why not, Brain 101, alcohol and other drugs in the brain, Brain 101, the adolescent brain. Lots of great information. So she thought maybe as a committee this would be helpful for us, and as we have our meeting coming up, it's just another piece that we can consider in terms of long-term communication with the parents and the community. So.
Very good.
Should we have these available for the parents who come that evening?
Well, I think that, maybe if everyone has a chance to read it, we can then make that decision. You
Okay.
can decide how valuable you think it is, because there's obviously a cost associated with it. So,
I believe it's $1.85.
per copy.
You know, it's hard, it's going to, knowing how many to, how many people are coming, how many to make up, or whatever. Okay.
How many pages? It's 30 to 33 pages, but it's probably copyrighted, so you're probably not allowed to just make copies.
That's right.
And we would not want to violate the copyright.
No.
Copyright
we would not want to do that.
1999, revised 2006, that means we cannot copyright.
So,
No, anybody,
we're,
nobody can
That, I handed the letter, the cover letter that I
Right,
gave to.
and I just gave that to Martha.
Yeah, okay, it tells you all the money involved in it.
right.
Okay.
This looks excellent.
You know, I'll
It's
give this
nice.
back to you, and you can just make us a copy then.
Certainly be happy. That's
I want
the
that.
only copy
I
I've
know,
got.
that's why I'm giving you back, Jan.
And it was, giving credit where credit is due, Sue Abrams is the one who located it originally.
Thank you, Sue. Great. I have another.
Okay.
I would like to commend every elementary school student from Taylor and from Morrow who attended the special performance at the Orpheum on Wednesday morning for The Sound of Music. And in particular, I must say many thank yous to all of their teachers who prepared them in the correct theater etiquette. Those young people were so responsive to that musical. They dropped a couple of songs, took a few speeches out, did an hour and 45 minutes straight through talking about young people sitting still. They were absolutely enthralled, and there was, they filed out by school, so I was helping in the aisles, and one young gentleman said, I have a couple of questions, and I said, yes, and he said, the train station really didn't look like a train station. And I said, oh, but you can't really put a whole train station on the stage. You have to give the illusion. He said, oh, okay. And the other question was, well, why did they have to do a real love scene? The kiss on the bridge. And I explained to him that was part of life. So he said, oh, okay. But they were, for an hour and 45 minutes, those young people were wonderful. So thank you to the teachers who showed them, yes, the way. And thank you to the Orpheum for
Must have been
providing
a good
that.
performance, too, to entertain them like that, or hold their attention.
Right, I was amazed.
Katie?
I'll try to be as brief as Bev and Larry. One question I had, it had come to my attention in talking about some new Department of Revenue regulations that the payment of floral arrangements for municipal employees, we may not be able to allow use of municipal funds except where we can show it's not an incidental expense. And I did look that up in the dictionary, and I'm still not clear. So I was wondering, just as we move forward, since this is new Department of Revenue regulations, if Mr. Jackson would be so willing to work with Mr. Scollins to actually make sure that we understand these new regulations. The bottom line for me, if a teacher or police officer dies, it is our job as their employer on either municipality to send flowers to their funeral. So I want to make sure that that's not going to be an issue. Also, secondary to that, if Mr. Jackson and Mr. Scollins could advise us. In 13 years, we've had 3 very tragic incidents where it is, I think, very appropriate for the school committee to send flowers for the death of a child. If I understand those new regulations, that is no longer appropriate, and the school committee would have to fund it privately. So perhaps Mr. Jackson and Mr. Scollins, the school committee does not take a stipend like the selectmen do, and I do not believe personally that we should. But if these new regulations are in fact correct, then we need to be in compliance with them. So perhaps Mr. Scollins and Mr. Jackson could recommend how we might proceed to have that in the event that that ever happens in the future, so that we're ready for it.
Sure.
If you concur with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. And if I may, just try to be brief, to give you the update on the drug and the alcohol and drug forum. We did say that we were going to go ahead with this draft. I just want to make sure that we are. There are a couple things that we need, and Dr. Norton, we will need some help here. I've outlined them very quickly. The March 29th deadline, the letter to parents doesn't need to go out, but we said we wanted to send out the community version. And that really, this is our only meeting in February. This should go out within the next 10 days. I didn't hear from anyone, so Dr. Norton gave
from
us.
anyone either.
We incorporated
No,
Dr.
it's fine.
Norton. I'd like to also suggest, though, since Dr. Norton gave us this suggestion that we want to ask community members for what they do, I would now say that this should be signed. And Larry, if you have no objection, since you and I are on the subcommittee, just the letter to community members should be signed by us so they know who to contact.
Right.
And that letter would need to go out. Katie Adair prepared quite an extensive list of community organizations. I don't have personally the resources to merge document. I would address envelopes. I will verify. We still need to get a lot of correct addresses and names. I would be happy to volunteer that, but I physically cannot do the merged document letter. So if Dr. Norton, I know that your staff has been very busy, but we should probably talk about how we can get, or do we hire, how do we get the letters taken care of?
How many do you think we have to send out?
There were, Katie's list, there were well over 100 letters.
100 organizations.
Yes, to, between all of the community groups.
Well, we must have a copy machine that holds these.
Yes,
So we
do.
don't have to,
Yes, we can fold them.
you know, and then probably if there's a
EQA is
100.
behind us. That was the
Yeah.
only thing I asked you to give us
Yeah.
a chance.
Basically,
We'll be more than happy.
I would even input the name and letter. I cannot do a merge letter and have it come out accurate. See, we would be sending John Doe at Boy Scouts of America, Foxborough, Massachusetts. I can't do that across the organizations. So if we would
I'm
need-
watching out of my peripheral vision, Wendy nodding. Talked to her, and she said,
Would we like
send
to
it
have
to
a
us,
camera?
and we will be happy to help you out.
Awesome.
Send it to us, please.
We also
I'm sure
distribute-
if Katie's got a list of 100, we probably can get them onto, you know, something that will put out labels.
Yeah.
So you don't have to handwrite them.
That's right, oh, yes.
You know,
Oh,
then
yeah,
we'll
the
have,
label.
then we'll
That's
have a
right.
list that we can work off of in the future.
That's right.
So that's probably a better way to do it.
The
I don't know
second
about labels.
help that we need, and this booklet is almost identical to the DA. The DA is going to give it to us free, and it has the same with pictures and so
Excellent.
forth.
Yeah.
And his is the same copyright date.
Yeah.
His is free. However, it will come to us, and it's not, I spoke with Paul Jackson about this, it's not a Word document, it is actually an Illustrator, and we would need somebody to help us download that. And I know, Mr. Jackson had said, when we get it from the DA, to send it to him, and we could, I have no idea what the price would be, if it's going to be less than $1.85 to reprint some copies, but Mr. Jackson was going to look into that for us. That should be arriving this week. And once we do have that, because we can design the logo that will say Foxborough Public Schools. That's the nice thing about the DA booklet. And if we could then have a resource to get that up on our website as soon as that's appropriate as well. And I just want to make sure that that's not going to be a problem. So I will get that to you this week. Thank you. And to update the other members, the other thing we said we would be doing this month, visits to PTOs. I think we're going to get the community letter out. We want to visit some PTOs. I don't know what the schedule is for the rest of the month of
Can
March.
probably
but,
find out from Wendy.
Would anyone like to? I plan to take a look and to go talk with, because we really want to get elementary and middle
As
school.
long as it's not a Tuesday night, I'd be available.
Okay. So
When you could just get us all the lists.
I
so
will
that we
let,
can-
yeah, that would be great. We can see who would like to go there, and I think we're all set and moving forward to the countdown of the 29th.
Okay.
Of March.
Right.
Celebrate my birthday together.
Is that your birthday, Martha?
Today's your birthday?
No, March
29th.
29th.
Oh, 29.
I always spend my birthday with the school committee in some way.
I guess you do. That's right.
I just want to update the committee a little bit on the superintendent search. I've been speaking with Glenn Kuchar, and they're very willing, able, capable to do whatever we need them to do, and there is no cost other than what it would cost them to produce things, be it a brochure or do the mailing. They have a list of, you know, who to put out to. What I'd like to do is put out there for anybody who would like to be on the search committee, to submit their names to me through the superintendent's office, to put a letter of intent, so that we can pick a search committee. And I think at this point, you know, we'd like a teacher from each of the schools, community member. The 2 school committee members will be Katie and myself. Probably 2 department heads from the high school, possibly one of the union leaders. So for people to put their names in, and then we will come up with probably 12 people to sit on the search committee.
When do you want the names by?
By March 1st,
Okay.
if we could. Then we'd like to somehow arrange focus groups, probably again, either through the schools or through the PTOs for each of the schools. Possibly tie in the 3 elementary schools. And Glenn Kuchar said this is something that he would do, that he didn't feel it was something that we should do because people might not speak as freely, so that's another benefit to having them involved with this. So that's kind of where we're at this point. And then they'll help us come up with the brochure and what they feel is an appropriate timeline for getting things done. Okay.
Now, should we start advertising?
That's one of the things they're going to come up with, an announcement to go out through, I think it's Education Week?
Yes.
Education Week.
That's correct.
They said not to bother, per se, with the newspapers, that this is the go-to
Education Week?
Education Week. That's where administrators or anybody who's interested will be looking.
Is it Glenn Kuchar's recommendation, Martha, that he would wait on the brochure and the advertising spec until after he does the focus groups, or can that be?
I think it can be done in conjunction. I'm gonna talk to Tim again. It's all part of the timeline, Kate. All right, as to what to do when.
I believe MASS, Mass Association of School Superintendents, also posts
Yes.
openings,
Yes.
and I would recommend that you post
Yep.
there also.
Okay. So just an update as to where we are. I'll be talking with him again this week, and I will get back to the committee. Okay, but it's important for people to submit their names so that we can put together a search committee. Okay. Anything else? The boys out back will be thrilled. It's not even 9 o'clock.
Oh, my gosh.
We need a motion to go in, to close this meeting, to go into executive session for non-union negotiations.
Not to come back on.
Not to come out, thank you, not to come out, back out into open session.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor? It's a roll call.
Aye.
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 Where do you want to do that?
We'll do it here. So
Can we take a 3-minute break?
Absolutely.
Thanks.